Okay, I'm Kim Brophey, and I'm the owner of the Dog Door Behavior Center in Asheville. And I am an applied ethologist and also a certified dog behavior consultant and trainer.
So, help for those of us in the lay public, the applied ethologist. What is that specialty?
Well, it's not surprising that you asked because it's a phrase you don't hear much, particularly in the US. It's a field that's very largely represented in Europe, and it refers to the study of animal behavior in captive or domesticated species and how that intersects with human behavior in those environments. So you may be studying companion animals like dogs, cats, birds, horses, etc., or livestock animals or animals in laboratory settings, but it's particularly interested in what happens when you take a captive or domesticated, or in some cases both, animal and put it in a human environment and how human behavior then interacts with that animal's behavior.
Wow, that and you focus on dogs.
Just dogs, yes.
Do you have special areas of interest within that field for dogs?
I would say all of it, right? Because for me, it's the relationship, and it goes from my concern client to client that comes in the door with a misunderstood puppy that's exhibiting normal behavior, and the person has presumptions about what the animal is doing and why, and I can clear up any miscommunications and help get everyone on the same page, to an animal that's exhibiting abnormal behavior because of dysfunctional relationships between the genetics and the environment they've found themselves in, and we can help put a plan in place to resolve those kinds of conflicts. And also in my community, as well as national community, for clearing up common cultural misunderstandings and common practices or poor practices about how people are interacting and living with their pets in the modern age.
Can you give me an example of some of those poor practices?
One of my favorites, or I should say less favorites, is the practice of thinking we have the right to pet everyone's dog and that a good dog wants everyone to pet them. We treat them in a way like fuzzy prostitutes that we have been somehow globally entitled to manhandle. And if you think about how inappropriate that is there any other species on the face of the planet, including our own, that wants to be groped by individuals they've never met? Now, there are exceptions. There are some dogs that, just like some people, absolutely revel in the attention from anyone and everything walking down the street. Perfect example is kind of your classic epitome golden retriever, right? And there are those dogs, but people don't realize those are actually abnormal within the greater population of dogs. And most dogs are more akin to how most of us would feel being approached by and touched by invasively someone that they've never met. And so when a dog behaves, communicating or acting out otherwise, that they're uncomfortable in those situations, growling, barking, backing up, baring their teeth, we label the dog as bad or the person as a bad owner, which is a completely inaccurate judgment of the situation and perpetuates a cycle of misunderstanding and ultimately euthanasia of millions of dogs every year in this country.
You brought a good point. It is that human nature. You see the dog, it's cute, and the first thing we do is reach out and want to touch, right?
Yeah, and this is reflexive for me. It's funny because I laugh at myself in here. I might have the cutest thing on four legs walk in, and every bit in me is boiling over with maternal oxytocin pulsing through my veins, and I want to grab it by the cheeks and kiss it. And yet I know that's not what the dog wants. None of its behavior, maybe for a whole hour, has asked or invited me to touch it. So I have to respect that animal's experience and where they're coming from so that I can meet that dog for who they are, where they are.
What's the kind of interaction you'd like to see? How can we correct that?
So it's interesting because if you look at countries like Germany, many countries in Europe actually, and the way that they behave culturally with their dogs, I wish that we could model something after that. And I'm really aiming to create one of the first cities in the United States, which we're trying to stake a claim as Dog City USA for here in Asheville, as modeling after places like Germany, where people take their dogs everywhere, restaurants, stores, they accompany them everywhere their people go. The dogs don't interact with the other dogs, and the people don't pet other people's dogs. Everyone's minding their own business. If you think about it, just as if we were walking down the street with our children or our family or our friends, if we have a reason to speak to someone else, or a common thread for why we might get together and have a conversation, or maybe even play after some familiarity and hopefully foreplay, then they can evolve to that. But the idea that we just stop and pet everyone's dogs, or that all dogs should stop and socialize in the middle of the street, is part of what's created the mass problem we're having of leash reactivity and unmanageability. That is the number one complaint that behavior consultants are seeing. And among my peers and my colleagues, we are increasingly of the shared belief that we have actually accidentally over-socialized the last few generations of dogs, where we had previously under-socialized dogs. Now we have over-socialized them, and we're paying the consequences.
Is there another one that tops your list along with automatically petting animals?
Well, I think another one that we hear and see a lot of evidence about is the misunderstanding about what dominance is. People have effectively confused domineering with dominance. Scientifically, dominance means control of the resources and the situation. If you think of that like good management, you're on top of the situation, you make good decisions, you know the destination, you're reading the road hazards, right? Like a good parent, you're just on top of things, that's all, and executing control of life. Domineering is I have to control you, and it's a battle of wills, and it's a struggle, and I have to have control over you. And that is the source of so much friction between people and dogs, and honestly, a lot of self-defense related aggression from dogs.
What would be a better environment?
Right. So it's interesting because, again, there's this thread of what feels right in there of, well, I feel like I should be the one making the decisions, right? Well, sure, the dog's not going to take the car keys, go to the grocery store and pick up dinner, nor are they going to get a job and provide for the family. It makes sense that we should just be kind of calling the shots day to day so that we can run a smooth household. Fair enough. But again, that's about controlling life as it happens. So simple things like being prepared for a moment as it transpires so that the dog is not rehearsing a behavior, say jumping all over your guests, just so that you sit there and yank on their collars and say, no, bad, sit down, what have you, trying to control the animal. Instead, you say, someone's at the door. If you choose to greet them politely with your feet on the floor or your rear on the ground, you'll find you can stay in the environment. If you don't choose to do that, I've thought ahead, left a leash on you, which if you jump on them, I could then pick up the end of that leash, walk you into the other room, and put you on the other side of a baby gate. I've managed to demonstrate I can control the situation, and your choices will have an effect on what that situation looks like, but your choices are always yours to make. That makes an animal think, feel respected, being given the dignity of making their own decisions, and yet within a structure that keeps everybody safe and has the clarity of, I need to be making the decisions.
You mentioned Dog City USA. This is a huge, Asheville and Western North Carolina loves dogs.
Right.
This is what will go into making this Dog City USA.
So what we're trying to do is, in concert with my book coming out in December, Meet Your Dog, which is supposed to be really, we're hoping, the first national translation of these multidisciplinary sciences and all of these practical principles for dog owners where they can understand it. In timing with the delivery of that book, we are trying to launch Asheville as the city that has already demonstrated we are stepping it up and raising the bar for public education and practices from the science that we have available in how we're living with our dogs. This is one of the most dog-friendly cities in the U.S. If you go around downtown Asheville, you'll find almost every store allows dogs. Most restaurants have outdoor seating that accommodates dogs. We have tons of breweries and different activities and things you can do with your dog, all targeted at share life with your dog. If we go about this wrong, if we go about it in following the patterns and the practices that we've had in place of over socializing and just winging it and letting every dog go up to every dog and not having certain agreements about what does it look like when you're in a restaurant with your dog? What does it look like when you're in a store with your dog? What's good etiquette? What's good practice? How do you respect the feelings of other dogs and other owners? If we don't have some shared agreements and knowledge about how to do this in regard for the whole community and everyone visiting our community, it's going to fail. It's going to blow up in our face. So we are trying to market it that way, and as a very critical part of that, educate the businesses that we've tagged as being the top 100 in Asheville every year that represent these shared values and have showed a commitment to doing it right.
So what would that mean? And you said restaurants, and I think, you see dogs going over to each other's dogs and look at my dog and that kind of thing all the time. What are the goofs you see, and what kind of environment would you like to see in a restaurant?
Right. Well, you can imagine being a waitress in a restaurant where everyone's winging it, and what a disaster it might feel like simply trying to bring someone their French fries and their soda, right? If the dogs are visiting between tables, if they're on retractable leashes that are getting tangled around someone's chair, or if you put the leash under your chair or the table, which then upends the whole table, if you're letting them go up and sniff every single person who walks by, some of whom might be frightened by dogs or not want to greet your dog, then we're making it difficult for everybody. I like, again, the model that we have like in Germany, countries like that, where the animals come in and they lay down under the table, much like you'd imagine service dogs should be behaving, I think would be a better aim for us to have. And you'd be surprised how easy it is to teach dogs these structures of what looks like service dog level obedience of behavior, when actually it's just a tremendous favor and relief to them of putting predictable patterns in place, just like you would for a kid, of when we go into this situation, this is what we do. And when we go into this situation, this is what we do. And so it takes all the ambiguity and unpredictability and the loaded stress of who's going to walk in and what's that dog going to do and what's that person going to do off the table for the dog, so they can simply enjoy being out to eat with their family.
Yeah, that's so true. And you're doing some of this with the Humane Society? Is this part of the...
Yes. Asheville Humane Society is an incredible organization I'm proud to be on the board of here in Asheville. They're breaking all sorts of molds as an animal shelter in the United States and raising the whole concept in their own right of a no-kill animal shelter, going beyond the concept of no-kill to establish that all animals have a right to quality of life, a life worth living, where their psychological and behavioral health is factored into life at the shelter and life in this community. And they have all sorts of initiatives on the ground that reflect those values, that it's not enough to just be alive. And it's the same type of education that is making the difference in terms of what we're trying to establish here with the Dog Door and Dog City USA, for getting people to understand the root